Thanks for tuning in once again to more college football talk on the Our Lads Football Network. It's week 7 in college football. It goes by fast, but at least we still have a few weeks to go in October. Marc Lawrence joining me, of course, from playbooksports.com. How's it going, Mark?
It's going just terrific, Greg. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're enjoying this college football season.
Absolutely, and it is just going to keep getting better and better because it seems that with Alabama's loss now to Texas A&M, which came out of absolutely nowhere, you love the. I mean, it's crazy when you like. It's one thing to have a team cover the spread, and all right, Alabama comes down from their win over Mississippi, but it's another thing to have the quarterback on Texas A&M who has looked as bad as any Power 5 quarterback this season go out there and look like Drew Brees on Saturday. It was amazing. I've never seen a transformation in a quarterback in one game like that in my life.
It sort of goes hand in hand with the fact that he was the star player in high school, probably an all-state performer, and he has the ability.
Yeah.
He hasn't shown it so far, but he stepped up onto the big stage and doing just that. So kudos to him for doing that. When I look inside of our midweek alert, that statistical newsletter, our daily racing form of newsletters, the one thing that jumps out at me if you look at Texas A&M's stat log is the fact that in their last 3 games, they've been out-yarded by over 140 yards in each of their last 3 football games, including that Alabama win last week. So all I'm saying there is that look for Texas A&M to maybe have still be up in the clouds, if you will, their feet not on the ground come this week because they're not earning the way they're playing on the field.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the quarterback.
Yes, it does.
I mean, if the look, I don't mind taking Texas A&M because Missouri hasn't they're 0-5 ITS versus FBS teams this year, so that's not any good, and they're 0-5 against the spread.
Yes, they are. Well, there's an Oklahoma factor there too, because remember Oklahoma was 0-4 to the spread when they met Texas, albeit a very fortuitous.
Yeah, oh my God, with that game.
Yes,
that was crazy. So anyway, yeah. So the thing is if you want to, the point is I don't have a problem taking Texas A&M, but I would not risk good money with that quarterback just yet, because I have no idea if that's the only game this year he's going to look like a superstar. So, because if it's the quarterback we've seen in the previous, 4 or 5 games, then Missouri could win the game. So,
but let me say this one quick thing before we move on to the card here is that when you look at that A&M log and you read in the Playbook newsletter, I'll mention oftentimes about teams leaking oil, and those are favorites that have been outgained in their last 3 football games in a row, of which Texas A&M would be an Exxon Valdez leaking oil favorite this particular week. So, that's all I'm saying out of the midweek alert to that A&M game.
All right, sounds good. Hey, Eli Drinkwitz could definitely use a program defining win, no question about it, because they haven't exactly had a good season so far. Okay.
Not yet.
No, not yet. I mean, even some of the teams they played and struggled against from the MAC and Conference USA, that's not good. Sticking in the SEC, let's talk about a couple of games. Of course, the game of the week is Kentucky and Georgia. And I was leaning towards Kentucky, and then I said, you know what? I just can't go against Georgia. I just can't do it. They're just playing so well defensively that maybe Kentucky's the type of team that can cover the 22, 23-point spread, because Kentucky has a really good defense as well. And I'm not really sure how good Georgia's quarterback situation is until they face a really good defense. And I think this might be the toughest defense that Georgia will face. But they've only surrendered 5.5 points per game, Georgia. And that means Georgia really only has to score like 31 points to probably cover. And I could see them doing it. But you have to be impressed with Kentucky beating LSU and Florida in back-to-back weeks. It's something they've never done. I don't think Kentucky has ever. I mean, I've been following college football for a long time. I have never seen Kentucky at this height before.
Well, it's all about Mark Stoops, as you know, Greg. He's doing a terrific job going toe-to-toe with every head coach in the Southeast Conference when it comes to recruiting. And it's showing up on the scoreboard for his football team right now. They're still being the type of a team that's often overlooked in a lot of games they play because people have this perception. Kentucky, a basketball team, a basketball school, not so much a football school, but he's changing that persona here really quickly. What I'm going to do here in this football game is I'm going to fade Georgia in this football game. If for no other reason, we often find times college football teams that assume the new number one ranking in the college football polls, and once they ascend to that level, they oftentimes slip on a banana peel. We've seen this so many times. We see it in college basketball where almost weekly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You'll find a new number one,
Yeah.
okay? You won't find it almost weekly in college football
Sure.
because it's not that long of a season, but they still tend to read the headlines and they still tend to have that champagne high after having done just that. You've got a Georgia football team here that is, you take a look at the things that they've done. One thing is, they're 6-1 to the spread against undefeated teams. If you go back and you look at this football program
Kentucky,
here.
yeah.
Kentucky, exactly right.
Yep.
Now they're taking this monstrous amount of points here. Handicapping football games is largely situational, and this is going to be a very, very tough situation for Georgia not to be able to get up to the level they were at last week, and especially having Florida on deck next week. I think this is a perfect spot for Kentucky to slip in there and take the money home with them when they leave the game.
Yeah, and even though they're off next week, it is their next opponent, Georgia against Florida, and that is still look ahead time. And Kentucky is not a team that they've really had to worry about over the last few years. It's actually it hasn't been a pushover opponent though. Kentucky's done a pretty decent job the last few years in just if it wasn't for their terrible bland offense. They act. Who knows? They might have been in close football games with Georgia the last few years. Now Kentucky has a better offense, so you're thinking, okay, if Kentucky can play the way they have the last few years with Georgia defensively, and get a little bit more out of their offense, again, we're talking about a 23-point spread. That's a lot of points.
It's a lot of points for a football game that has defense written all over it. Low-scoring type football game, and you have to give the kudos to Kirby Smart here. This defense is smothering, as you mentioned here. I'm just absolutely smothering. You allow Clemson, Arkansas, and Auburn a total of just 13 points in 3 football games. Yeah. That's absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
Now we'll see whether or not they can keep the screws on and maintain that level here in this Kentucky game. But too many points for me in this football contest to pass up.
Now the other game that I thought was intriguing to go over, especially since it's one of my top picks, is the Tennessee Ole Miss game on Saturday night. And I was a little bit surprised that Tennessee was getting 3 in this one when I first saw the line come out. That to me, I think that's a little bit more of just Kiffin and Ole Miss and their high-powered offense. They still have all the name recognition, and Tennessee hasn't earned it yet. But this is an up-and-coming team now, for sure. Josh Heupel has got this young team coming into their own. They're offensively on all cylinders, thanks to Hendon Hooker, who is completing nearly 70% of his passes. He's got a 13-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He can run, so he's a dual threat. So he's really learning now that Josh Heupel offense. And when that happens with a young team and you throw in all the confidence, and all of a sudden you've got a really good football team that's close to becoming a good football team, I should say. And I think this is just a good spot, too, because Ole Miss has got to be coming down. They have to be. I mean, you just went, first of all, you played Alabama. Then you a 52-51 game that you could just see Lane Kiffin. I mean, he looked like he was, I don't know what happened after the game. Maybe he needed some smelling salts in the locker room. But you knew this had to take out a lot out of this team. And now they got to travel to Tennessee and take on a Tennessee team that has beaten Ole Miss 13 of the last 15 times they've played them. And they've also get the fact that I'm sure the fans are going to be all over Kiffin, the former Vols coach. I just think this is a good spot for the Vols on Saturday night.
I think it's a terrific spot for the Vols here in this football game here. Josh Heupel's the key to this Tennessee program. He's really, really ignited the passion back into football in Tennessee. And we're seeing it here thus far this football season here. 4-2 so far, nothing wrong with that at all for Tennessee. And I think the point you hit on is it really cements the fact that how can Mississippi get up for a football game like this after having gone toe-to-toe in a 15-round fight and losing on a split decision, and then taking out onto the road and laying points in an up-and-coming football team like the Vols here. I think Tennessee's got this game upset written all over it, and so too do the people in Vegas, because as you mentioned, this game opened up at 3. It's now down to 1.5 as we're speaking here. So there's been a lot of support for Tennessee for all the right reasons.
Also, Tennessee has averaged 526 yards a game in their last 3 versus SEC teams. And now they're taking on the 102nd ranked defense in the nation. So scoring should not be a problem for Tennessee, and probably for both teams. I mean, I don't do totals, but what is this? This is going to be, is this going to be like over 80?
I don't think it's going to be over 80. I don't know if Tennessee's going to contribute that on that end of the equation, but it's going to be for sure in the 70s. And when you talk about a football team that comes off of a game where it was over 100 points scored in the game,
yeah,
everybody's going to want to knee-jerk and get back up over with them again. But you look at a pole vaulter who just pole vaulted 18 feet in his last jump. You think he's going to exceed that a week later in his first jump? I don't think so. I think this is a regression as far as the total goes in this football game as well. If you don't like Ole Miss, you don't like the over total in the game as well.
And by the way, too, keep an eye on the running back situation for Tennessee. Their number 1 running back, the kid Evans, he's got nearly 500 yards on the ground already. Banged up. At this point, we don't know if he's going to play, so just keep an eye on that. And Ole Miss, by the way, you can get that right here. Not even publication. The playbook publication. Ole Miss 3-23 against the spread as a road favorite of 14 or less.
That's a pretty strong number.
Yeah.
It just basically shows that Ole Miss doesn't handle being road favorite very well in football games.
Not at all. All right, let's go to the Big Ten. We got a few games to talk about, including the Purdue game. Now, this is interesting because the Purdue game, this is like, for horse racing, this would be called a sheets game. And for football, this is a, whatever you want to call it, a trend, a historical stats game. But that's all this is. Because initially when I saw the spread, I was like, why is Iowa only an 11, 12-point favorite against Purdue? And then you dive into all the numbers. And almost all of them. Not only are they all favoring Purdue, but they favor Purdue in such an incredible way that it makes sense, especially, and just throw the stats and the trends out the door, just the series. The fact that Purdue has beaten Iowa 3 out of the last 4 that they've played them, including 3-0 against the spread, the last 3 is dogs. So this is just one of those college football series matchups that Purdue always finds a way to keep it close and sometimes even beat Iowa. Throw in the blizzard of trends that just favor Purdue, and you have to take the Boilermakers in this one.
This is a great spot for Purdue in the football game. Not only was Iowa fortuitous in the sense that they came back and beat Penn State after Sean Clifford. Penn State was pummeling that football team.
I could not imagine if I had big money on Penn State how that would have felt.
Oh, absolutely.
Painful death.
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. But, Iowa benefited from that, so give them credit. They took care of business when they had to take care of business. Now, is there a bounce here in this football game for Iowa? Well, sometimes when we talk about the sheets and you see these improving numbers on horses, is there ever a horse race where a jockey fell off a horse like Sean Clifford fell off of Penn State and the horse went on to put up a really good number? We don't know that, okay?
No.
But all we do know is Iowa appears to be peaking and could be bouncing in a football game like this. You've also got in Purdue, inside that midweek alert, one of only 10 teams in college football this year that's been perfect in the stats. And that's what you look for at this stage of the football season, are teams that have not lost or been pushed around in the stats, and they're dressing up as underdogs. And this one's dressing up as a healthy underdog in this football game. I think this Purdue has got all the makings of an upset in this football game, and I do like the Boilermakers over the Hawkeyes.
Iowa 0-9 against the spread in their last 9 as a conference home favorite. Purdue has covered 14 straight as a road dog of 11 or more. And right now it's at 11.5. And if you throw in, the 0-9 against the spread last night as conference home favorites of 7+ with revenge. I had to throw that in there because Purdue upset Iowa last year 24-20. Kirk Ferentz, 2-7-1 against the spread as a conference favorite after beating an undefeated team. The only thing that Iowa going for them is what's been going for them all year, and that's the turnovers. They have been feasting on turnovers. They are number one with the plus 15 turnover margin. Purdue is number 115 at -5. That is how Iowa will win and cover the football game. If they just hammer away at the turnover margin again, and it's 5-0 Iowa, then Purdue's in a whole lot of trouble. If they could somehow just eliminate that turnover deal, then you feel real good about Purdue.
Let me say this about turnovers, okay? And turnovers is a real strong part in the handicapping equations. And I've talked with a lot of people. A good friend of mine who was as astute as anybody, he's since passed. We used to go back and forth with him and Billy Walters and a lot of really sharp people. We would talk about how do turnovers affect football games. And the only way to go about handicapping turnovers is basically from the approach of regression to the mean. You have a team like Iowa who is leading the country in net turnovers, and you have a team like Purdue that is minus in turnovers. In a football game like this, you're going to look for these two football teams, one to go back and the other to come forward, because you're benefiting from the point spread, from the results that Iowa has had because of being plus and Purdue being minus like they are. You're going to see these turnovers are going to end up tending to even themselves out by the end of the football season, especially when there's such a wide variance as you have in a game like this. So don't let those turnovers concern you. You're aware of them, but those are the things you're looking for in turnovers, big gaps favoring an underdog.
All right, now I had a hard time making my final decision on who I wanted to make my 5-star or co-5 stars this week. And I decided when it really came down to it is which team has really cashed it in for me this year. And that team has been Michigan State. Michigan State, as we know, every year you never know which one of those teams you're going to want. There's always going to be a handful of teams, maybe one or two that rise above the rest that become your team that year. And I love that team this year. Last year it was San Jose State was one of them for me because they had such a great, and I was just behind them like every game. The Boise State upset, and it was a great ride. But Michigan State this year is becoming one of those teams for me. And that's why I decided that, all right, they're going to be one of my top picks. I might as well make them my top pick because of that. They got a few things going for them as well on this one. They've got the revenge deal. They got shut out last year by Indiana. I think that's going to be important because there's not going to be a letdown. And we all know how important that's going to be with the Michigan game coming up after a bye. Also, Indiana, 0-7 against the spread. Their last 7 at home against opponents with a 700 or better winning percentage. We also know that Indiana's just not playing well this year. This is a completely different Indiana team from the ones that we saw the last couple of years. And bottom line is you have one team with Thorne at quarterback, and then you have, we've talked about Kenneth Walker before at running back, and then the two receivers, Reed and Naylor, have really played well. We saw, they had, 4 touchdowns last week of like 60 yards or more. I just think they're humming right now at a really good pace. While Indiana's just kind of, their confidence levels here and Michigan State's here. Throw in the fact that Michigan State's got the revenge factor, and I don't see them going, oh yeah, we got the Michigan game coming up, so we're just going to lose this one. And then, no, let's go into that Michigan matchup undefeated. So we can go undefeated against undefeated, and I think that's going to make them zero in even that much more this week.
A couple of concerns for me in the football game. Number one, I've been trying to fade Michigan State and been getting my brains beaten out, okay, doing that because they are just that, as you said, this football team that's on a roll. It's really difficult to step in front of them. But when they assume roles, in which I think they're maybe incapable of handling, that's laying points on the road against a football team that was perceived to be good but hasn't played well this year, the talent is still there on the Indiana football roster.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have to be fearful of that. The other thing is, I see chinks in the armor in this Michigan State football team. When I'm saying chinks in the armor, and I keep alluding to horse racing, okay? And, when you have a racehorse in a big race, you don't want that horse to have sore ankles or a bad knee, or, you want him to be 100% healthy. You don't want to have chinks in that horse, okay? In Michigan State, this football team, last week in the Rutgers game, which they managed to get the win and the cover in, they allowed Rutgers their season-high yardage in FBS football games this year. The 2 games before Rutgers, Michigan State was out-yarded in both of those football contests. That's sort of dodging bullets, if you will.
Yeah.
3 games in a row for Michigan State. So if it ends, where does it end? It probably ends in a situation or a stop like this against an underachieving Indiana football team. And so for that reason, I don't want to shoot arrows at your 5-star, but
sure.
I have major concerns in this football game from a handicapping perspective that I think Indiana might end up surprising Michigan State.
Well, again, like I said, and we've talked about this before, when you ride a team and they're just they cash in checks for you every week, you don't, and then you're saying, well, who do I take this week? Well, you're going to go with the one that has been cashing your check every week.
Yeah, you brought to the dance, right? Yeah, exactly,
so,
brought you to the dance, right?
And I understand everything you're talking about, because even that number, because I could see Michigan State still winning the game and not covering. That's what I'm concerned about more than anything, is them winning a game like 27-24, and they win, but they still can't cover that spread because it's gone up to 4.5, and I don't want to see that go up any further because it started at 3. That was a lot better at 3. By the way, Michigan State 4-1 against the spread. Indiana 0-4 against the spread. Jack Tuttle might get the start. Now, I hope he does. Tuttle, and let's keep in mind, Tuttle played in a bowl game against Ole Miss last year.
Yes, he did.
He didn't play particularly well. They lost that game. They were riding. Things were going well until Penix got hurt. And then everybody thought Indiana was going to, Cinderella, they're going to win the bowl. But then Penix got hurt, and Tuttle did not play particularly well in the bowl game. So I don't really care if Tuttle plays. I actually prefer it. But I also don't want to see Tuttle start and Penix come off the bench and save the day for Indiana.
There we go, yes.
Yeah, I don't want to see that. All right. Let's move on to the other team in the Big Ten. And they're not going to be playing another Big Ten team, though. Initially, when I saw the spread of Wisconsin Army, I thought that was kind of low. And I figured that is big Wisconsin against Army, and you're at home and it's only 13. But then, you got to charge your head and look at everything. And I just really feel that this is a potential spot for an upset. And that's why I'm putting him in as one of my upsets this week, because it's possible that Paul Chryst might be on his way out soon. And it may not be this year because they just gave him a new deal, but it could just be the start of maybe we need to start rethinking things here. And Mertz has been terrible all season, so they're not getting anything in the passing game. What I'm concerned of the most is if Christian Anderson plays or not, Army, because he's a big difference maker at quarterback if you compare him to the other quarterbacks at Army. He did not play against Ball State, and they lost to Ball State. And he's a runner, obviously, at Army. That's what they do. But I think what people are forgetting about Army is that they are a really good defensive football team. And if you look at it, they've got Andre Carter, who is right now one of the top pass rushers in college football. They have another linebacker, Eric Smith, who helps contribute to Army's 3rd-ranked rushing defense. So if Army defensively can do a really good job against Wisconsin in that run defense, that equalizes things. I just really feel that much better if Christian Anderson plays, but I'm still willing to say, you know what? If I'm going to go with a couple of upsets this week, I think this is one I need to go with.
If Christian Anderson plays, Army becomes a play. For a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, they check a lot of those boxes. I think there's a perception about Wisconsin being this big, bulky, beefy, well-stocked rushing football team. They ran the ball for only 43 yards against Michigan in their loss to Michigan. And you've got another military team that usually always gives their best effort going up against Power 5 conferences. And they do that because, number one, they're usually taking a generous amount of points. But it's proven out in the numbers. They're 14-6 to the spread. The last 20 games are military teams against Big Ten opponents. This is an ideal spot here, I think, for Army to come in here and put a stamp on their program here. Jeff Monkman's doing a great job with this program here right now. And we're going to end up having a Commander-in-Chief Trophy Award winner when Army plays Air Force. The winner of that game is going to win the Commander-in-Chief because there's 2 pretty good football teams involved there. But right now, here today, we get a starting quarterback in the lineup for Army here. I will be on them plus the points against Wisconsin.
Let's not forget the last few years, they barely lost at Michigan and at Oklahoma. And that Oklahoma team is a lot better than this Wisconsin team. By the way, you mentioned the running situation. Wisconsin against Illinois, 391 on the ground. Eastern Michigan, 352 on the ground. That's inflating the stats.
Yes.
Because against the better defensive teams, Penn State 180 with a 3.1 average, Notre Dame 78 with a 2.7 average, and Michigan 43 with a 1.3 average. So when they play good run defensive teams, they have been stopped. Army is a good defensive team against the run, and if they can stop the run, they have a shot. Okay.
They do. They do. But I guess my only exception to that might be the fact that Wisconsin puts them all up against Big Ten teams, and Army plays a little bit of a softer schedule. So
Absolutely.
softer opponents, better stats.
Yes.
But they're still, that is a strength of theirs, is their rush defense. And it's not like this Wisconsin team, like we were saying. They're not a juggernaut on the ground this football season here. So I think it's a solid handicap to Army in this game.
And Army also needs to take advantage of the turnover margin in this game because Wisconsin has turned the ball over quite a bit on the season.
Yes.
Okay, let's now move over to outside of the Big Ten and into a Friday night game. Now, we're recording this on Friday morning, so it should be available on YouTube by around noontime, 1 o'clock, more than enough time before the Clemson Syracuse game. And I wanted to make this a game because I just thought this was interesting enough to take, even though the offensive lineman for Clemson believes that Clemson's offense is going to shake up the world. And if he's prophetic, then I'll listen to him next time. But I don't. I think he's talking out of his ass because Clemson's offense has been outright terrible, 117th in the nation, and they're going to go up against Syracuse's 22nd ranked defense. I've mentioned this before a few weeks on this program. Syracuse is a good defense. That's really where they thrive. They've got a defensive lineman who has 6.5 sacks, the kid by the name of Roscoe. They have a trio of really good linebackers. They got Coley at safety. They have really good defenders that you have to keep an eye on at Syracuse. And Wisconsin's got some guys banged up. Let's keep in mind. Tyler Davis has been out. Breezy's been out, or Breeze, whatever, how you pronounce his name. I forget it. But he was a top freshman last year. So I just think that this is a potential upset pick. Until Clemson comes out and shows that they're they haven't showed it at all this year. Until they show that they are like the previous Clemson teams, I'm just going to ride a 4-1 underdog and say I'll take the points. I think Syracuse has a shot to win the game.
One of the biggest misnomers in handicapping football games is trying to use a team that used to be good and saying they're going to be good this week. You're making a big mistake by doing that. Number one, look at the Kansas City Chiefs in the National Football League side of things. Everybody says they're going to come out of their funk, their slumber. Well, the Kansas City Chiefs are leading the league in turnovers. They play very sloppy defense. There's a reason they're struggling. There's a reason Clemson's struggling here as well. They were decimated with a loss of talent last year in the National Football League draft. And simply put, they're a targeted football team, and they're not playing real well, obviously, here. The proof is in the pudding. You look at the stats about these two football teams and where they were last year and where they are this year. You've got a net of 491 yards of differential of where Clemson's offense and defensive stats were as opposed to where Syracuse's are this year. That's amazing, okay? Orange has really improved thus far this football season here. I don't think they're going to be intimidated by any way, shape, or form in this football game here. The pressure's all on Clemson in the game. I think Syracuse comes and plays a loose, easy game in this football contest, and I think they take home the money as well.
And by the way, Syracuse 4-1 against the spread, 5-1 in the stats, and they were dogs of 2, 2, 5, 6, and 6 this year. Now they're getting 14.
Yep.
So, all right, next up, as we move right out of the ACC, and well, actually, let's just do one more ACC game before we turn to the other Friday night game, and that's Boston College. The reason I want to do this game is because of the different opposite trends that work for Boston College here. if you look at it, North Carolina State 0-5 against the spread the last 2 years as a road favorite, including 0-1 this year at Mississippi State, while Boston College is 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 as a home dog. They've lost one game this year, a game where if they don't get a bad snap on that last drive to Clemson, maybe they beat Clemson and they're still undefeated. I just think, and they're 6-1 against the spread their last 8 at home against North Carolina State. I like North Carolina State. Doran's done a really good job there, but they're a much different team when they go on the road in this spot. And I think Boston College, once again, just like the Missouri game a few weeks ago, I just think they're being a little underplayed here. And I like Boston College.
I agree with you. This is a big game for both teams here. Obviously, NC State sits 1-0 in their division, and they're both in the same division in the ACC. Boston College 0-1, so a win here evens things up. Boston College loses; they're 2 legs back, and probably won't make that gap up. So it's a big game for Boston College in that sense. You mentioned Dave Doran went on the road laying points. He's been terrible. The last 6 times he's laid points on the road, he's not covered a ticket in that particular role. And you've got Boston College is eating up the money just terrifically as a home underdog in conference games, 9-1-1 to the number. I think you have to take a real hard look at Boston College in this football game. NC State plays with a lot of name and reputation right now these days, and Boston College is still under the radar. It's a good value play to the Eagles in this contest.
Yeah, Hafley's a good coach. They're both good coaches. And remember, even though I think what's happening is Boston College is still being treated like the same team that they were a month ago because they lost their quarterback. It's like, but they've proven that they can win without their quarterback and cover every game without their quarterback. So why are they still being looked at? Because if Jurkovich is the quarterback, they're favored in this game.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
All right. Now, there's another game later tonight on the Pac-12. I wanted to only mention this for the same reason that we talked about the Boston College, North Carolina State game, because of the different trends that favor Cal. Cal, 2-0 against the spread as a dog this year, 10-1 in the last 11 as a road dog. Oregon, 0-3 against the spread as a favorite this year. So, and then throw in the fact that Cal has beaten Oregon over the last couple of years and covered both games. And even though Cal is 0-4 against FBS teams, they have lost 3 of the 4 against FBS teams by 7 points or less. So it's not a pretty pick because their offense is pretty bad, but it's just one of those where the trends favor kind of Cal that much that I just kind of feel they have to be the pick.
You know, sometimes you like football teams because of coaches, and I like Cal because of their coach, Jonathan Smith, doing a great job bringing this program back up. And as you know, yes, exactly. And I'm not a huge Mario Cristobal fan by any means. I think he does a great job recruiting, but I think he's a lot like Ed Ogeron. He's a cheerleader on the sidelines, and they don't finish the job Oregon does in football games. We're seeing that. Just look at their stats numbers this year. They're nothing even close to being the best team in the Pac-12 conference. This is a sneaky spot here for California. Here, I'm not going to be snapping the rubber band on this football game, but I would have to lean to the Bears in the contest because I will still remain anti-Oregon from now until every game that they dress up as a favorite.
All right. Now, the other game in the Pac-12, I know we're going to go up against each other in this one, and this is really going to be this is going to be anything that has to do with trends or sheets or anything. This is just going to be about 2 football teams that I happen to believe one is just better right now, and that's Utah against Arizona State. I think these are very equal teams, very equal, and yet it's a pick 'em at Utah. And the reason why I think it's very equal is the one reason we talked last week when Utah was one of my top picks, Cameron Rising. This has been a completely different team the last few weeks with Cameron Rising on the center for Utah. It is just the perfect fit. Everything is working. He's a leader. They're rallying behind him. He has been incredible. He was incredible last week. Arizona State, meanwhile, when I look and see that, and you guys mentioned this in the newsletter, that Herm's worst loss was at Utah in 2019, 21-3. I looked at it as an advantage for Utah because maybe that's the kryptonite to Herm. He goes to Utah, it's a problem. We've seen a lot of teams have problems at Utah late on Saturday nights. Devin Lloyd is for real as a linebacker. You know, he's going to be a really good player to keep an eye on at the next level. Both teams lost to BYU, which is kind of interesting. But you'll take a look at the schedule. Yes, Arizona State is 5-0 in the stats. But let's also keep in mind it's UCLA, Colorado, UNLV, and FCS. And they did lose to BYU. So if you really look at it, the best team both of these two teams have played is USC, and they even have a bad coaching situation. So neither team is really 100% proven yet. That's why I think they're even, but I'm just going to ride this Utah Rising thing that's going on right now because I think they got something going. I think they're being a little disrespected here as a home pick'em.
So you're playing the Rising at Utah.
I'm rising with Utah. Yes, I am.
I get that, but I'm going to be on the other side of the football game here with the Herm Edwards edge in the football contest as far as I'm concerned. Number one, when he doesn't have to lay points in the game, he's 12-4 to the spread, 7-0 in those same games when his defense is allowing less than 17 points a game. And they're also one of the only 10 teams that have been perfect in the stats thus far this football season here. And if you give Arizona State the stat win in this football game, you put Utah in a mighty, mighty hole. You just take a look at our write-up in the newsletter here. The overall yardage winner in the last 24 Utah games has won the games 22 times. I'm not saying that Arizona State's a lock to win the stats in this football game,
sure,
but until they prove different to me, they haven't lost them yet this year. I'm going to ride Herm Edwards and his revenge in this contest here. I personally feel Arizona State is the best team in the Pac-12 conference right now. And being that the case being what it is here, I'll be on the Sun Devils in the football game.
And if you think about it, this game here could end up being the battle of the two best teams now that Utah looks like they found their quarterback.
Correct. Exactly. So the winner of this might likely end up being the Pac-12 champion.
Yeah, because I have to look. Are they in the same division?
You know, I'm not 100% clear on that as we speak right now. You maybe take a quick look in the preview guide.
Yeah, let me see here. They are. No.
They're not?
No, yes, they are. Excuse me. So that means that one of them, whoever wins this game, is probably going to end up in
winning
the Pac-12 championship game. And probably want to play in Oregon.
Probably
or Oregon State.
Yeah, more likely Oregon on paper.
The winner of the Oregon State game.
Yes, as will the winner of this game probably meet each other in the Pac-12 championship game. Correct.
Yeah, and who knows what the Pac-12 is going to be like anytime soon, too, because I don't even pay attention to all that realignment stuff. Okay, now, a couple of games in the Mountain West. Here's a game that is one of my top picks because, honestly, I'm trying to figure this out. I totally get behind Troy Calhoun. I think he's done a tremendous job at the Air Force program. No question about that. I think this is a really good Air Force team. And we've talked about before that this is not one of the better Boise State teams, but they're also, I don't think, as bad as maybe some people think. And I think we saw that last week, which is why I took advantage of them getting almost 6-7 and 2-1 on the money line against BYU. And it's why I'm going to take him again here. Everybody's betting Air Force in this one. The line has dropped from 6 down to 3.5. And I honestly, you'll tell me why, because I don't know why. I still think Boise State, because remember, they lost the UCF game week 1 when they led pretty big and early. And this is not the same UCF team because of injuries. But that was a tough ask week 1. They lose to a good Big 12 Oklahoma State team by a point. They lose to Nevada. Okay, there's nothing to shame about. I even picked Nevada in that game. They beat BYU, undefeated at the time. They have played a tough schedule. Air Force has played New Mexico, Florida Atlantic, FCS, Navy, Utah State they lost to, and Wyoming. So they played a couple of decent teams, but not the schedule Boise's played. Boise's at home on the blue turf. They've beaten Air Force the last 4 years by 15 points per game. And they're 13-0 straight up and 11-2 against the spread the last 13 off an upset. I'm sorry. If Air Force beats them, then beat them. But I think Air Force has to prove that they can step up and beat Boise in this type of situation. They're not a 7-point dog, a 10-point dog. It's a 3-point spread. I'm taking Boise.
There is a lot of value to Boise in this football game for all the reasons you mentioned here. And there's reason because Boise State has been ping-ponging all year long, winning and losing. They've got a yin and a yang thing going on here, and it's really, really difficult to be consistent about anything the Broncos are doing this football season. And that's all because of a new head coaching change that's taken place there. Now they come into this football contest taking on the #1 team in rushing in all of college football, which means the Boise State defense will be on the field a lot longer than they want to be in a game like this. It's what the Air Force is all about, just churning up the yards and burning up the clock in football contests like this. I love running dogs in college football, and with the personality that Boise State is carrying thus far this football season here, I'm going to be on Air Force. Truthfully, I think there is a lot of value stripped out of this football game because of the reasons I just mentioned here, so won't snap the rubber band here, but I think Air Force ends up being the right side of this football game.
Okay, and then one of my other 5 stars is not going to be a glamorous game. And actually, 2 of my top picks this week will not be glamorous games, but I don't care about that. I usually stay away from the games, these types of games as top picks, because you never know. Once you start going down to the group of 5 and crazier things seem to happen because the talent level isn't as good. But Colorado State as a 10-point favorite against New Mexico is just too good for me to pass up for Colorado State. If you want to jump on a team when they are just feeling it, you want to jump on Colorado State right now because their confidence level is absolutely through the roof. They are feeling it right now, and they're even doing it with a couple of key injuries. It doesn't matter. Even Dante Wright, their star wide receiver, hasn't played. Maybe he plays this week. They're playing New Mexico, and they're a 10-point. That's a 2-score game against New Mexico. New Mexico is the 124th ranked offense. They're 0-5 against the spread this year. And Colorado State has also owned the series straight up and against the spread against New Mexico over the years. If you look at it, New Mexico has played 2 Mountain West Conference games this year. They've lost them both by a 69-17 margin. They've lost a yardage battle by 780-419. That's going to continue in this one. I just don't see Colorado State, now that they're at this level, wanting to lose that. I just don't. I don't see the letdown game. I think they're gonna. I'd be surprised if I'm squirming in the fourth quarter in this game.
I don't think you'll be squirming here either. Here, you got Colorado State atop their division in the Mountain West, New Mexico at the bottom, and New Mexico is fastly trying to overtake New Mexico State as the worst team in the state of New Mexico, the land of enchantment here, because they've turned lousy all of a sudden, real bad, real quickly here. New Mexico has. Their offense is simply pathetic, and I don't see anything that they can do in a game like this to stop Colorado State doing from what it is they've been doing really rather well here of late. A perception game of 2 teams going in opposite directions here. I can only look to the team that's playing their best football right now, and that being Colorado State. I'm not the kind of a guy that goes out and lays double digits on the road in college football, but this is a home underdog that I certainly will not be backing in this contest.
And then the last game is in the MAC, and that's Ball State and Eastern Michigan. And I usually, whenever I take an Eastern Michigan game, it's usually because I take Chris Creighton. But I usually also take him when he's a dog. I haven't taken them recently, though, and I'm not taking them in this game either. I'm riding Ball State. Before the season started, this was a good Ball State team. And they kind of, they didn't really get off to a good start, but that's because of the schedule they played. They've lost to Penn State, Wyoming, and Toledo, all bowl teams, including Penn State. We know how good they are, and they beat Army, and they beat Western Michigan, who could be the best team in the MAC. Eastern Michigan, even though they beat Miami of Ohio by a point, was outgained by 128 yards. They also beat UMass, Texas State, and an FCS team. I'm sorry, but Ball State was the better team before the season started. They're the better team now, and it's almost a pick 'em. So why wouldn't I jump all over Ball State? You're going to tell me that's why.
I'm going to tell you why. Being a devotee of the midweek alert, Ball State has been out-yarded in every football game they played. They are the epitome of a leaking oil favorite this week, having been outstated in every one of their football games. I don't know what they're going to do to turn things around and suddenly put a good game on the field and out-yard an opponent in a game like this. I'm a big Chris Creighton fan here as well.
Yep.
He's 4-2 to the spread in conference games as a dog. win, he comes in with a better record, which he does in this football game. I just don't see any reason what warrants it all to me, Ball State going out and laying wood in a football. It's not a lot of wood here. Obviously, like you say, it's closer to a win situation.
And it's come down. It was 2.5. Now it's 1.
Yeah, but I'm still going to log it as a leaking oil favorite,
Sure.
Unless obviously it flips between now and Saturday. But Chris Creighton, dog, Ball State being this leaking oil favorite here, put me on the Eagles.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up for Week 7 of college football. What's going on with Playbook Sports? Because baseball playoffs and college basketball season starting soon, and the NBA.
Yeah, NBA's right around the corner. We've done really, really well in baseball. We've won all 4 of our baseball releases in the playoffs thus far this season here. And we got a great special offer where you join me for my college football Fall's favorite play of the month this weekend. You'll also get my baseball plays as well, chipped in all. Just a $79 fan appreciation weekend. You can take advantage of that at playbooksports.com. If you happen to call into the office and do just that, mention the word Prime, and we'll knock even $10 off that promo as well. So check it out, all online, playbooksports.com.
Mark, appreciate it. No horse racing show this week. The cards just don't look very good at all, so we decided to make a pass. Breeders' Cup coming up. So I know a lot of the best races are kind of behind us, and that's might be a kind of quiet ride until the Breeders' Cup weekend, but hopefully we'll be back again next week to talk the horses.
Hey, I look forward to that. We'll see what happens next week as far as the ponies are concerned. I'm going to wish you the best of luck this week on the college football gridiron.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mark.
Be good, Greg. Thank you.